In the Bronze Age, the island of Crete gave birth to Europe's first civilization, that of the Minoans. Their wealth, art, and architecture influenced the world around them, especially the succeeding civilizations of the Mycenaeans and eventually the classical Greeks themselves. Although the beginnings of the sophisticated Minoan society are dated to about 3100 BCE, the origins of the Minoan people span much further into prehistory. Archaeological evidence from southern Crete reveals stone tools at least 130,000 years old, including those of the Acheulean type. This suggests that the island may have been visited or at some point settled by the early humans, although likely not continuously. When it comes to animals, only a handful of mammal species inhabited the island during these early times, known as the Old Stone Age. Among these were the Cretan deer, a dwarf elephant, otter, a lineage of mice, shrew, and the large terrestrial Cretan owl. By the end of the period, many of the largest species, such as the elephant and the owl, would cease to exist. Eventually, modern humans would emerge. This brings us to the time of the Neolithic Age, to as early as the 8th millennium BCE. The scholars believe that it was towards the end of the 8th millennium that the first Neolithic human settlements emerged on the island. These prehistoric Cretans reportedly first emerged in the area of Knossos. Where did they come from is not entirely known. Many scholars have suggested places such as the broader Aegean region or Asia Minor, the alternative theories going as far as the Near East. To judge by what later became the so-called Minoan language is also virtually impossible. The Minoan writing system of the Bronze Age still remains undeciphered. So far, it has not displayed similarities to any other known language. When it comes to the genetic research, the closest people to the Bronze Age Minoans were none other than the Mycenaeans. A study involving samples from 19 ancient individuals suggests that both Minoans and Mycenaeans share at least 3/4 of their ancestry, which comes from the earliest Neolithic farmers of the Aegean and Western Anatolia. Whatever the case may be, these Minoan ancestors founded an early hamlet in Knossos by about 7000 BCE. Initially, the settlement was believed to have consisted of no more than 25 to 50 people. The early Cretans lived in wetland daub huts and grew crops such as domesticated cereals and legumes. They also introduced cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and dogs. The settlement was built exactly on the site where the later Minoan palace of Knossos would be erected. The Cretans were yet to produce any pottery at the time, which led the scholars to call this the pre-pottery Neolithic period. By the year 6000, the village of Knossos increased its population to estimated 200 to 600 inhabitants. They have gradually built 1 or 2 room square houses of mud brick walls, which were set on stone pillars. On the inner side, the walls were lined with mud plaster. The roofs were flat and made of branches and mud. The main room of the house also typically included a fireplace hearth. The most important development of the settlement seems to be a large 8-room facility located in what would later be the site of the west court of the Palace of Knossos. This large building covered the area of 50 square meters or 540 square feet. The points of greater stress throughout the facility were supported by the large stones underneath. The building likely contained storage units and was the central point of the village. The earliest Cretan pottery also dates to around 6000 BCE. Early Neolithic saw a variety of several different shapes, such as wide-mouthed cups, closed-mouthed cups, and basins. These vessels were handmade and fired at low temperature. Their surface was dark and carefully burnished. Very often it was engraved with linear patterns or dots and decorative reliefs. The Middle Neolithic period saw further enlargement of the settlement. Between 5 and 4000 BCE, the Knossos population is estimated at up to 1000 inhabitants. The buildings kept much of their early Neolithic style, except that the windows and doors were now timbered. Raised hearth typically occupied at the center of the main room, and pilasters, together with cabinets, beds, and other features, occupied the perimeter. Homes, evidently, became more family and privacy-oriented than before. The main building, known as the Great House, spanned 100 square meters, or 1100 square feet. It was made of stone and likely included 2 stories, each containing up to 5 rooms with a meter-thick walls. The Great House was the chief public building, serving as predecessor to the Minoan Palace in Knossos. By about 4000 BCE, the late Neolithic period had begun. Population increased significantly, not only in Knossos but throughout the whole island. Fishermen huts also became widespread throughout the Cretan shores. In southern Crete, the Messara plain provided a fertile area ideal for agriculture. It is unknown how far the borders of the polity of Knossos reached at this point. Although still far removed from its Minoan era size, Knossos was undoubtedly the largest and most significant settlement on Crete. It likely controlled significant area around the settlement itself and had multiple sea access points. To the south, the site of Phaistos also emerged by the year 4000. It originally consisted of several scattered villages, which were to eventually grow into the second largest Minoan palace. Other sites such as Labena, Palekastro, and Partira also gained prominence in the late and final Neolithic periods, especially when it comes to pottery. By this time, the Cretan pottery became more refined, including both burnished and early painted designs. It involved the more frequent use of closed shapes and the appearance of jugs, 2-handled vessels, and the small pithoi. Besides these sites, as well as Knossos and Phaistos, pottery was also present throughout the Cretan caves, such as Trapeza, Elathia, and Plativola. In the later part of the millennium, the final Neolithic period served as a transition into what would become the Minoan civilization. Early metallurgy emerged, as well as contacts and trade with sites outside Crete, such as the Cyclades. Cretan settlements were quickly becoming increasingly urbanized, especially Knossos. It would be the first true city that emerged on Crete, with increasingly powerful ruling class. Knossos had kept its position as the most significant Cretan settlement throughout each Neolithic phase, and was leading the way into the early Bronze Age. By 3100 BCE, a new period began on the island of Crete. A period that we today call the Minoan civilization. It likely was not brought by new settlers or another culture, but developed locally by the original Neolithic Cretans. Naturally, it would be none other than Knossos that spearheaded the Minoan period, both as the most significant Minoan city and the capital of the wealthy, influential, and powerful Minoan civilization. Episodes on the Minoan Crete, Mycenaean Greece, and the Bronze Age Aegean will continue. Consider subscribing to get notified on the upcoming content. This was WanaxTV.